Hello, students. This is the video that I'm making for JMS 494 about public relations and ethics. And I'll tell you, when I took over this class a few years ago, there was not a great deal of information about ethics in the class, even though the title of the class is Media Law and Ethics. So I added some more information to make sure we were educating students about ethics and the importance of ethics, especially as relating to work in one of the professional media industries. But then I also realized that the number one major in the School of JMS is public relations. And I think many people watching this video are either in the public relations major or wanting to get into the public relations major. Our public relations program here at JMS is excellent. So kudos to my colleagues who teach specifically in that major. Or if you're not in the PR major, you're in another JMS major, or you're getting the minor. You're majoring in something else here at SDSU and you're getting a minor. But I still thought it was very, very important to include some information specifically about public relations and ethics, just so that we're all educated individuals. First off, I am going to give some salary information. Okay, now this is from U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics from 2023. At this moment, these are the most recent statistics that I can find. And, you know, the stats might not be written in stone, but just look at the general trend here. What this data says for people who want to work as news analysts, reporters, or journalists, the median annual wage is $57,000 or $57,500 a year, which does not seem like a great deal here in Southern California. It's probably a little bit higher in Southern California. But look at this now. For people who work specifically in public relations, the median income is almost $10,000 higher. Okay. So there's more money to be made in public relations. And get ready for this. Get ready for this. If you want to work specifically in advertising, yeah. If you work as an advertising or promotions manager, the salary is significantly higher. Now, why do I bring that up? Well, I repeat, I do not believe that the purpose of a college education is job training. I repeat, I do not believe the purpose of a college education is job training. I think the purpose is education. If you can become an intelligent, critical thinker and you learn basic principles and theories and you know how the world operates, then you will be better prepared for changes that are going to come to you in the future. When I got my PhD, it was about 20 years ago, there was no social media. If there was social media, it barely existed. So the world is constantly changing. So we cannot here at SDSU, and I'm speaking for myself now, feel strongly about this, we cannot teach you the right button to push to get a job, because by the time you graduate, there'll be a new button. And then 5 years later, there'll be a whole new button. But if you understand the principles and theories of effective communication and understand ethical principles, you will do well, inshallah, wherever you end up working. Anyway, all this is a way to say that people in PR or advertising make a lot more money than people who work in straight journalism, if you are interested in such things as salary. But just to repeat, I think the purpose of our education here is just to educate you and make you a strong, smart person. Okay, so this video lecture is about public relations and ethics. Here we have some information. This is for the PRSA website. This is a organization devoted specifically to people working in public relations, PRSA. And on their website, they have this great information, little position statements about different ethical issues that relate to public relations. Yeah, plagiarism, ethics, and social media. I'll try and put a link to this in the lecture notes. But yeah, I think this is very good information for those of you interested in public relations. You should certainly check it out. But for the bulk of this video lecture, it's not actually me talking. It's this Fabiana Melendez Ruiz. Maybe I'm saying her name correct or incorrect. Anyway, there she is. Here's her image. This is an episode. I'm going to play almost the entire episode of a podcast called Ethical Voices. Ethical Voices podcast. I'm going to play almost the entire episode. It was released on March 10th, 2025. And what we're going to hear, and this is a great podcast, what we're going to hear about is the importance of diversity, the importance of having a diverse workforce, especially if you want to put out a media message that is going to resonate with different aspects of the audience. And we live in a very, very diverse world. You might be frustrated by that. You might get sick of the word diversity. I don't care. This is the reality in which you live and in which you will be working. So you need to learn to respect and understand all aspects of diversity simply to be an effective worker. Okay. And that's what we're going to hear about here. Now, we also talk about the importance of the media. This comes up in this podcast. Many traditional media outlets, sometimes called legacy media outlets, are suffering. They're not doing well financially. We are seeing a transition from analog forms of distribution, meaning over the air transmission of radio and TV or print newspapers or print media, towards online forms of delivery. There is money to be made in online, but the famous phrase is we have traded analog dollars for digital dimes, that the money that's being made from digital platforms is not as much as what used to be made from the old forms of distribution. So it could seem at initial glance that some of these media industries are dying. I think they're just changing. I do believe that. We will always need people to effectively communicate, to deliver information, deliver news, entertain us, deliver advertising. We will always need people to do that, and there will always be jobs for people who can communicate effectively. But we are certainly in a moment of transition, and I really, really like that this podcast emphasizes the importance of preserving media outlets. If you consume news, if you consume entertainment, you need to pay for it. It's not free. Someone has to pay for it. So yeah, I like that that's in there. And then finally, this is discussed. Hopefully you can see this and it's not being covered up by my shoulder here. The difference between paid and non-paid media. This comes up. Paid media refers to something like advertising. When you take out an advertising message, you control the placement of the message. You control every word of the message. If you put out a PR release, press release, or you hire a public relations firm, they want to generate a message that will then get picked up by journalists and incorporated into the journalist story. That's what you want to do. That's an effective way to communicate, to put your message out in such a way that it gets picked up. That is earned. That like you put out a message and the media has picked it up. So that's earned media. Owned media is something where the company actually owns the media outlet, like a blog or a podcast or something like that. So there's differences between paid and non-paid media. Ideally, in the perfect world, and this is what's discussed here on the podcast, when you hire a PR firm, you're not paying for media placement, and they ethically should not be guaranteeing you placement in a newspaper. If they're guaranteeing you placement in a newspaper, now you're taking out an ad. Now you're taking out an ad. So when this discussion happens later in the podcast, I wanted you to understand that if a PR firm is promising guaranteed placement in a TV show or some type of news outlet, that is crossing a line. Now that is paid media. Now you're effectively buying an ad. And when you're hiring a PR firm, that's probably not what you want. You want a company that is going to effectively manage your relationship with the outside world. Also, you might need a PR firm to manage relationship with employees if you're a big organization as well. PR firms help organizations sort of maintain good relations with all publics, both internal and external. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, I've said enough. There's a couple of questions. As usual, there are 4 questions. I think there's a question coming up soon. Then there'll be 3 questions later. But most of this video lecture is this one podcast. And just so you're not staring, I want to say it's just so you're not staring at a screen, listening to audio. Otherwise, WTF, Arsenault, this could have just been audio file. Just because you're not staring at a blank screen, I found video of, I think it's from a POV video from a food truck. And it's basically that. I just put that there. Not that it relates to what you're hearing, but I just wanted something on the screen. I drop in a couple of images here and there, but for the most part, this is a podcast, an episode of Ethical Voices, talking about public relations and ethics and issues of diversity, and the visuals are cooking in a food truck. Woo! That's it for now.
Welcome to Ethical Voices, a weekly podcast where real pros share real stories about real ethical issues. I'm your host, Mark McLennan. Joining me on this week's episode is Fabiana Melendez-Ruiz, a strategic storyteller serving as the founder and CEO of Refuerzo Collaborative. Why don't you tell our listeners more about yourself and your career?
Sure. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Refuerzo Collaborative, which is a Latina-owned public relations agency based out of Austin, Texas. We really focus on nurturing stories that reinforce community. So we work with a lot of nonprofit and or mission-driven organizations or leaders. We're one of the few agencies in a state that is 42% Latino doing media relations in Spanish. We do it in both English and in Spanish.
Thinking about your career and the work you do, what is the
Mhm.
most difficult ethical challenge?
I confront ethical challenges all the time. As the media landscape shifts and we see newspapers folding, you encounter more ethical issues. I've had what I would consider minor ones and really big ones. I've had clients who, for example, are putting out a book and they're like, go review it on Goodreads or Amazon. I've worked with agencies where this is a very gray issue. There's some people that are like, it doesn't matter. Sure, we'll review it. I'm very black and white on that particular issue. I will never review a book on behalf of a client because it's not an authentic review. And if I hate it, what are the repercussions if I review it 1 star? That's on the less intense side of ethical issues. On the bigger scale, my ethical issues intersect with DEI issues, which I know is like a spicy word nowadays, but it's true. Fortunately or unfortunately for me, I'm usually one of the few hires of color, usually the only Latina or or anybody else. Insert miscellaneous ethnic groups there. And so I've had issues where, for example, one of my clients was a huge hotel group, a huge client, very important. They were debating whether they should throw a Cinco de Mayo party and if they should call it Cinco de Drinko. I always preface with I'm not Mexican, I'm Venezuelan, and there is a difference, but also
Mhm.
sometimes you kind of have to speak up on behalf of other people. And I was like, we can't do that and we can't call it that because one, we're in Texas where a lot of the population is Mexican
Mexican.
and someone is going to bring it up. And you think that it's just like a non-issue and it's going to be a fun party and everyone's going to be too drunk to care. But like someone somewhere at some point is going to turn this event that's supposed to drive publicity into a crisis situation.
I had a client who shall remain nameless, but somebody on their team decided a 7 deadly sins party would be a good idea for Halloween. And then they followed it up with, let's put Hanukkah gelt and dreidels in the green room. At least you hopefully had a chance to speak up and caution them about the
Right.
assumptions.
I was a very junior publicist, but I immediately knew that this was going to turn into a bigger issue. Thankfully, it didn't happen, but they could have done it without my input, and then where would we be?
Let's step back. When somebody, and we'll give them the benefit of the doubt, in good faith, comes up with an idea that they think is brilliant, that is completely culturally insensitive, that is completely inappropriate, stereotypical, tokenizing, whatever word we want to use.
Mhm.
How do you recommend people counsel their clients and their organizations to step back and understand what they're saying?
I'm glad you brought this up because I do genuinely believe that a lot of these mistakes happen in good faith. People just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And there's also things I definitely don't know that I find out later. I'm like, oh, I always come from a place of curiosity. So if a client or an agency that I've been with has an idea and they're like, it's brilliant, best idea we've ever had, and it ends up being quote unquote problematic, I always ask first, okay, how did you come up with that? What was the thinking behind the idea, or what was the core kind of nugget that led to we're going to throw this event in this way? And then I help them. I work backwards. We'll say, okay, you wanted this. And when we cross-examine the idea, it started here, but you want this thing.
Mhm.
But let's go through it and break it down together as like PR people, all of the little things that could be an issue. And then they're usually, yes, this is a great way to turn a really good idea into a crisis issue. And we don't want to do that, right? But your core nugget is brilliant. So let's find another way to get to this thing that you want that it'll be less of a problem. Ideas like that. People know what they want to do. When you strip down big ideas, you can find the little pieces that you can still salvage. So I'm like, maybe it's not a seven deadly sins party. It's a like Halloween party. And do we want to tie it to a religious theme, or do we want a harvest party or an equinox party? Something that still honors the traditions of this holiday or this thing that you want to do, but is a little less like likely to blow up.
Mhm. No. One of the things you talked about, getting to the root of the issue with the Cinco de Mayo party or Cinco de Drinko or however they ended up saying it, is assumptions that organizations are making and stereotypes that organizations are making, which is unethical. How do you help organizations, or how should organizations think and act to go beyond their inherent biases?
I have an answer that's, I think, going to displease everybody. And usually what I counsel everyone to do is, hey, you need to hire people from those generally minoritized communities. Like, that is
Mhm.
the answer. When I bring this up, I get two non-answers back, which is either the talent isn't there, like the talent pipeline. We've tried to hire Latinos, but we don't have any. And I'm like, okay, that's untrue. Or I don't know, we want to steer clear of, I'm in Texas, right? So we want to steer clear of any DEI issues. And I'm like, okay, so you're saying that hiring diverse people would become a DEI issue. Why? Why are we immediately going there? What are we doing internally as an agency that's turning it into that? I think really it's not even about the diversity. I think for me, you want to reflect the world you want to live in, right? Or you want your campaigns and your workforce to reflect the world you want to live in, and or the world we do live in. And the reality is we live in a diverse world, whether people love that word or not. So the best way to make sure that you're doing right by those communities is by having people of those communities within the organization who can then raise the red flags when they need to, or offer the diverse perspectives that you need to. And it's interesting because there's so many other industries that have roles specialized for that. In publishing,
Mhm.
they have sensitivity readers who, like,
Mhm.
if you have a book about a thing, and for example, like World War II, someone's gonna have to read to verify that it aligns and that it's not like overly offensive. So it's interesting how we have that in certain things, but not so much in PR, where I'm like, this is all going to be public facing. No matter what you do, it's public facing. And it's not so much about the sensitivity part. I think people get very hung up on the ethics thing because they're like, we can't make everybody happy. We're just so tired of everybody being so upset all the time. And I'm like, don't you realize that it's a consequence of many years of not doing the right thing? Like,
Mhm.
this rage, this perceived collective rage didn't happen in a vacuum, right? It's been many years of a lot of things. We don't have to go down all of the history, and it's come to a crux, right? And so usually when things explode and you're at a crossroads, you can make two decisions. You keep the status quo, or you do the right thing and you reassess and you pivot. And those that don't pivot die, like metaphorically, right? Agencies that don't pivot are going to do bad work and they will no longer be here.
And it's one of the arguments I'll use occasionally with the executives that don't listen to the moral right thing to do, which is the reason it's there, but it's also being diverse and knowing your communities is good business. You do better. There's enough studies out there that show
Right.
organizations that do this, doing it makes you more money. So it's be selfish and do it.
It's the same thing with language, right? What happened to the languages that didn't evolve?
Yeah.
They're dead languages for a reason. And so you're totally right. I see us all the time. And I hate that I have to pull that trigger, but if that's the lever we have to use, it's listen, if you don't want to do it out of the goodness of your heart, Latinos,
Yeah.
for example, have studies have come out that we have a $1.3 trillion spending power. Latinas specifically, the GDP of spending power is greater than the state of Florida.
Yeah.
So it's so funny because I'm like, people want to be marketed to.
But one of the things I find interesting, and we talk about this a lot with our firm as well, is making sure you're not painting with too broad a brushes. You talk about you're a Venezuelan American, and I know also doing work in South America over the years. I mean, if you're talking about Ecuador versus Peru versus Venezuela, there's differences there. It's
Oh,
not
yeah,
just, you can't just say, hey, we're going to market to Latinas. Wait a minute. And people need to understand that.
totally.
Taking a step beyond your own personal experience, what are you seeing as the key ethics challenges facing our profession today and tomorrow?
I love this question. The first one would be in line with a lot of what we talked about, but DEI or diversity, it's still a problem. I feel like a lot of agencies are underutilizing this diverse talent pipeline that they have, either because they don't want to, or I don't know. There's a lot of reasons. I think the second one is, this is also very controversial. I believe that as PR pros, we have done a disservice to the media. And I can go into it, but essentially, I think one of the big ethics issues is media isn't doing well. And part of it is it's pivoting, which is great. Like we're seeing a lot of media companies move to TikTok or Reels. And that is, whether you like it or not, the way a lot of people nowadays are consuming the news. And at the same time, we just had a newspaper in Bartlett, Texas close full. This is a newspaper that had been publishing regularly since 1886, every single week without fail, and it just folded. It couldn't survive. It died. And one of the things I see when I go to PR panels and people talk about the ethics or what's going on in our industry, I seldom see or hear the conversation steered towards our duty to support journalism. For me, it's less of I need media for my job and more of I respect the work that they're doing. I recognize that, like every ecosystem, it is a fragile ecosystem. And if things continue with legacy media, even if things evolve, like TikTok isn't going to be enough for what we used to do, right? For me, the biggest ethics issues are related to that. And I've worked in a lot of agencies where clients get placed in like a Business Insider or even a local newspaper, and they're like, I want to read it. I want to read the thing. And I think it's cool to send clients the clipping so that they have it because that's part of what we deliver. But I'm the first one to tell clients, you need to buy a subscription. If you really want to be in Forbes or whatever, you need to start buying the magazine because obviously I'm buying it because I have to read it so that I can, because you write what you read. But if you really care that deeply, you should also be reading it so you understand what people are writing about. But the insidious thing I want is I want to keep publishing a lot.
No, I think it makes sense. Media is a stakeholder, just like anything else. One, you need to be respectful there. And two, I can remember years ago, back when I started, going on 30 years, there would be like very specific niche trade publications, and it's behind a paywall, but it's get subscribed. Don't, even if it's $1,000, which is some of them are more. Don't get it to us for free and don't comp it, and we totally get it. So I think you're right. I think the way we're dealing with the media and just the future of the evolution of the landscape is going to be very interesting because I've also seen over the years, back when I was first starting a long time ago, there was a strong paywall between pay and earned. And it's been because of the decline in subscriptions and the change in advertising, that wall is becoming more fractured and blurred.
It becomes a problem, right? It's a hell of our own making because you have clients that get spam emails from PR agencies that say, we can guarantee you press, but they don't understand that it's not guaranteed. It's advertised. It's paid. And we did this to ourselves when clients are like, this agency is guaranteeing press because they don't understand the ecosystem because we've disrupted that ecosystem. That's the thing I told people. I'm like, the 2010s were our F around and our 2020s are find out, right? Because the disruptors, right? Like we had Uber and we had Airbnb and we had BuzzFeed and Vox and all these new media conglomerates. 2020, it's like the taxi industry is disrupted. Hotels are cheaper than Airbnbs. And now we have no, but I'm like, yeah, we thought we were doing something. And in the end, we're finding out what we did was maybe not the course to take.
You're right. It's an interesting time. And the scary thing is that Fred Cook did a study out of UNC Annenberg, and I spoke to him a couple of years ago, but it was looking at consumers are increasingly unable to distinguish between paid air and shared and owned. And the scary thing is about 55% of them said they don't care. What is the best ethics advice you ever received?
The best, trust your gut. Just trust your gut, because PR is a difficult job, not because of the actual work, but because we work with people. And I think that's a piece that is forgotten about or isn't talked about enough. Like 90% of my job is emailing people, calling people, or going to an event to talk to people. That is the job. So a lot of the things that you learn, you can put in a formula, like how to do a press clipping or how to build a media list. But a lot of the rest of the job you learn through doing. And the thing with people is every person is different, right? So I can have a formula for how to respond to a certain thing or how to deal with a certain thing, but it's always going to be different. So I've learned that to be a good publicist, it's 50% training, 50% intuition, because I've had situations where it's a similar situation to a thing that happened with another client, and I was ready to handle it the way we handled it for the other client. But then intuitively, I was like, no, I feel really strongly that we need to do it this other way. And 9 times out of 10, when you lean into intuition for ethics things, you're right. And intuition is is an evolutionary thing we've developed as humans to let us know that danger is near or that something isn't right. And so I think it's easy for people to think but there's a reason you should lean on both your training and whatever gut feeling is.
Thank you, Fabiana, and thank all of you for listening. You can visit ethicalvoices.com for additional content. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Google Play.